A poor wayfaring man of grief hath often crossed me on my way, who sued so humbly for relief that
their families. The hymn must have provided tremendous solace to them in their final moments on earth. A poor wayfaring man of grief hath often crossed me on my way, who sued so humbly for relief that I could never answer nay. I had not power to ask his name, whereto he went, from whence he came. Yet there was something in his eye that won my love, I knew not why. Once when my scanty meal was spread, he entered, not a word he spake. Just perishing for want of bread, I gave him all, he blessed it brake. And ate, but gave me part again, mine was an angel's portion then. For while I fed with eager haste, the crust was manna to my taste. I spied him where a fountain burst clear from the rock, his strength was gone. The heedless water mocked his thirst, he heard it, saw it hurrying on. I ran and raised the sufferer up, thrice from the stream he drained my cup. Dipped and returned it running o'er, and I drank and never thirsted more. 'Twas night, the floods were out, it blew a winter hurricane aloof. I heard his voice abroad and flew to bid him welcome to my roof. I warmed and clothed and cheered my guest, and laid him on my bed to rest, and made the earth my bed, and seemed in Eden's garden while I dreamed. Elder Taylor said, soon afterwards, he was sitting at one of the front windows of the jail when he saw a number of men with painted faces coming around the corner of the jail and aiming toward the stairs. The other brethren had seen the same, for as he went to the door, he found Brother Hiram and Brother Richards already leaning against it to prevent it being opened, as the lock and latch were comparatively useless. While in this position, the mob fired a ball above the keyhole. At this, Brother Hiram and Brother Richards leaped back. Almost instantly afterward, another ball was fired through the door and struck Brother Hiram in the left side of his nose, entering his face and head. He immediately fell without resistance, flat on his back, crying as he fell, "I am a dead man." And he never moved afterwards. It is my belief that that scene was the most difficult scene the prophet ever had to endure. For Hiram had been there since the boy prophet returned home from the grove with the story of the first visitation. What's more remarkable is that Hiram was almost 6 years older than Joseph. How do older brothers treat younger, pesky, especially younger teenage brothers? How did the older brothers in the Book of Mormon treat the younger Nephi when he came home with stories of visions and angels? They mocked him and ultimately tried to kill him. In contrast, when young Joseph brought home the story of the first visitation, Hiram believed and never, ever wavered. Thus, I feel this last scene that Joseph passed through must have been one of the most difficult, probably the most difficult he ever faced. I'm certain that it broke his heart to see his dearly departed brother. Elder Taylor said he would never forget the feeling of deep sympathy and regard manifested on the countenance of Brother Joseph as he drew nigh to Hiram and, cradling him in his arms, exclaimed with tears streaming down his cheeks, "Oh, my poor, dear brother Hiram." The door was pushed open, the firing resumed and intensified. Elder Taylor had in his hands a large hickory stick. He used the stick to parry off the firearms as they protruded into the room. By the way, Jacob Hamblin went in the next day and counted the pockmarks from balls in the room, firings. He counted 58 in the walls, There were 8 more, and Joseph and Hiram informed Brother Taylor. That's at least 70 shots into that room in about 2 minutes. Elder Taylor describes it thus: "It certainly was a terrible scene. Streams of fire as thick as my arm passed by me as these men fired, and unarmed as we were, it looked like certain death. I remember feeling as though my time had come, but I do not know when in any critical position I was more calm, unruffled, and energetic and active with more promptness and decision. It certainly was far from pleasant to be so near the muzzles of those firearms as they belched forth their liquid flame and deadly balls. While thus parrying the guns, Brother Joseph, standing right behind him, said, 'That's right, Brother Taylor, parry them off as well as you can.' Brother Taylor said these were the last words I ever heard him speak on earth. Every moment, the crowd at the door became more dense, and as they were unquestionably pressed on those in the rear ascending the stairs until the whole entrance of the door was literally crowded with muskets and rifles." Again, Elder Taylor's words, with the swearing, shouting, and demoniacal expressions of those outside the door and on the stairs, and the firing of the guns mingled with their horrid oaths and execrations, made it look like pandemonium let loose, and was indeed a fitful representation of the deed in which they were engaged. After parrying the guns for some time, which now protruded thicker and farther into the room, and considering that it might have some friends on the outside, Brother Taylor made a spring for the window opposite the door. As he reached the window, he was struck by a ball midway in the back of his thigh that hit his femur, flattened out like $0.25, and passed into the fleshy part of his front thigh. He says he instantaneously lost all power of locomotion and fell on the windowsill and cried out, "I am shot." He felt himself falling out the window, but fell inside for some unknown reason. When he struck the floor, he crawled under the bed that was in the room with his left side exposed back to the door, and was wounded in 3 other places. One ball entered a little above his left knee, was never extracted. He used to let his children and grandchildren feel that, and reminded them never to forget where it came from. Another one entered into his forearm, passed under the skin, and lodged between these 2 bones right here. A third hit his left hip and left a wound that he said was large enough to lay his whole hand in. At this point, Brother Joseph, perhaps thinking that he might save Brother Taylor and Brother Richards, walked calmly to the window. Being shot from behind, faltered to the floor, but somehow pulled himself up to the windowsill and out, and fell out, tumbling outside. The cessation of the firing followed, and the mob rushed outside. Elder Richards went to the window. When he turned toward the door, he heard from under the bed, "Stop and take me with you," from Brother Taylor. He dragged Brother Taylor into the jail cell that's on this side of the jail up there, on the 2nd floor. He went to leave Elder Taylor after throwing an old filthy mattress on him, and he said, "Don't leave, take my coins and watch with you." So they cut the lining in that very dark room, he'd been in there, cut the lining of his pocket out, put the coins and watch inside, and tied a string around it, and left. Elder Taylor describes, "Soon afterwards, Dr. Richards confirmed our worst fears that Joseph and Hiram were gone. I felt a dull, lonely, sickening sensation at the news when I reflected that our noble chieftain, the prophet of the living God, had fallen, and that I had seen his brother in the cold embrace of death. It seemed as though there was a void or vacuum in the great field of human existence, and a dark, gloomy chasm in the kingdom, and that we were left alone. Oh, how lonely was that feeling, how cold, barren, and desolate. These reflections and 1,000 others passed upon my mind. The poignancy of my grief, I presume, was somewhat allayed by the extreme suffering I endured from my wounds." He further describes, "Soon afterwards, I was taken to the head of the stairs and laid there, where I had a full view of our beloved and now departed Brother Hiram. There he lay as I had left him. He had not moved a limb. He lay placid and calm, a monument of greatness even in death. His noble spirit was gone to dwell in regions more congenial to its exalted nature. While he lay there, a number of persons came around, among whom was a doctor, and such a doctor, according to Brother Taylor. On seeing the ball lodged in my left hand," this is his words, "took a penknife from his pocket and made an incision in my hand for the purpose of extracting the ball. And having obtained a pair of carpenter's compasses," you know what those are, right? Sharp point on one end, pencil on the other. "Made use of the compasses to pry out the ball, alternately using the penknife and the compasses." Of course, they jacked him up with painkiller to start, right? "After sawing for some time with the penknife, and prying and pulling with the compasses, he ultimately succeeded in extracting the ball, which weighed about half an ounce. I have that right here in my pocket. Just kidding, I don't have that. I wish I had it. I really do. I don't know where it is. We don't know if we have it. But anyway, sometime afterwards, this again, Elder Taylor, the doctor remarked to a friend of mine that I had nerves like the devil to withstand what I did in its extraction. I really thought I had need of such nerves to stand such surgical butchery, and that whatever my nerves may be, his practice was devilish. Elder Taylor was removed to Hamilton's tavern, whereupon another medical man appeared, maybe the same one, I'm not sure, and extracted the ball from his right thigh, which was greatly swollen by then and giving him much pain. I'll leave you to discover the rest of the details about that. They eventually transported him back to Nauvoo. And here he says, as we drew near to Nauvoo, what seemed like the entire town came out to meet me. A very large company of people of all ages. Elder Taylor says, never shall I forget the differences of feeling that I experienced between that place I had left and the one that I now arrived at. We had come to the city of the saints, the people of the living God, friends of truth and righteousness, thousands of whom stood there with warm, true hearts to offer their friendship and services and welcome my return. The next day, his little boy wanted some candy. Said, you got to go to Brother Richard's, he's got my coins. So he went and came back. The pouch consisting of the pocket lining was returned to him. He and his family were not a little amused to find that his watch had been struck by a ball. He sent for his vest, and upon examination it was found that there was a cut as if with a penknife in the pocket where he had the watch, and that in the vest pocket the fragments of glass were literally ground to powder. Elder Taylor states, it then occurred to me that the ball that had struck me at the time, I felt myself falling out the window, and it was this force that threw me back inside. I had often remarked to Sister Taylor the singular fact of finding myself inside the room when I felt a moment before, after being shot, that I was falling out. Never could account for it until then, but here the thing was fully elucidated and rendered plain to my mind. I indeed was falling out when some villain aimed at my heart. The ball struck my watch and forced me back. If I had fallen out, I should assuredly have been killed, if not by the fall, by those around. And this ball, intended to dispatch me, was turned by an overruling providence into a messenger of mercy and Savior. I shall never forget the feelings of gratitude that I then experienced towards my Heavenly Father. The whole scene was vividly portrayed before me, and my heart melted. I felt that the Lord had preserved me by a special act of mercy, that my time had not yet come, that I still had a work to perform on this earth. Some have questioned whether that might be possible. All I can tell you is Brother Taylor felt that that's what happened. 6 weeks later, having recovered from his wounds, Elder Taylor penned what we now have as Section 135 in the Doctrine and Covenants. I want to read just a couple verses out of here, if I might. This is verse 3. Joseph Smith, verses 1 and 2 kind of announce the martyrdom. Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord, has done more, save Jesus only, for the salvation of man in this world than any other man that ever lived in it. In the short space of 20 years, he has brought forth the Book of Mormon, which he translated by the gift and power of God, and has been the means of publishing it on 2 continents, has sent the fullness of the gospel to the 4 quarters of the earth, has brought forth the revelations and commandments which compose this Book of Doctrine and Covenants, and many otherwise documents and instructions for the benefit of the children of men. Gathered many thousands of Latter-day Saints, founded a great city, and left a fame and a name that cannot be slain. He lived great and died great in the eyes of God and his people, and like most of the Lord's anointed in ancient times, has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood, and so has his brother Hiram. In life they were not divided, and in death they are not separated. So there we have it. The rest of the story you know, and each of you is living this story and a living testament that the church did not, as predicted by many, die off with the death of its founder. Rather, according to Joseph's prophecy made many years before in Kirtland, Ohio,
We thank thee for